If you followed an ordinary Roman through one full day, what would actually take up most of the time? Most retellings imply Roman life was all speeches, gladiators, and dramatic politics in public squares. In practice, daily life was more about routine, friction, and tiny decisions that could ruin or save the day. If you followed an ordinary person from the moment the day began to the moment it ended, the biggest surprise would not be how exotic everything looked. It would be how structured life already was, even without the tools we now treat as basic. So instead of staring at kings, battles, or big historical headlines, let us follow the ground-level routine and see what the day really felt like for the average person. The day opened with practical concerns almost immediately. A normal day began simply. A Roman citizen might eat a light breakfast of bread or leftovers, get dressed fast, and head into a city already moving. Even before any paid work or business began, there were errands, contacts, and practical needs waiting outside, which meant the day started less like a grand historical movie and more like a rush to get positioned properly. Morning routines were usually about preventing problems before they started. A bad start in a world like this could echo through everything that followed. This is exactly where the era comes back to human scale. The famous headlines stayed far away, while regular bodies handled the actual burden of the day. What looks small from a distance often decided whether the rest of the day felt manageable. That is why ordinary routines deserve more attention than the stereotype usually gives them. Once everyone was moving, the day's real workload became obvious. A lot of time disappeared into movement and obligation. Depending on status, someone might open a shop, seek work, stand in lines, visit the forum, deal with paperwork, or navigate patronage relationships. Ancient Rome was deeply social and public, so getting things done often meant showing up in person, waiting, and being seen by the right people. Household survival and useful work were usually tangled together. From the outside, it can look repetitive, but inside the routine, it was the difference between order and trouble. What looked small from a distance often decided whether the rest of the day felt manageable. That is why ordinary routines deserve more attention than the stereotype usually gives them. Seen up close, show up was not just a visual detail. It shaped mood, behavior, and the amount of strain people had to absorb before the day was done. This is the part many people misjudge from a distance. Food through the day stayed practical. Many people relied on bread, olives, cheese, wine, or whatever hot food could be bought cheaply, rather than on the lavish meal culture that fills pop culture. The average person was managing appetite around work and money, which made the city itself part of the meal system through bakeries, stalls, and taverns. This was not random improvisation. It was learned practice. It sounds basic only after somebody else has already learned how to do it well. Seen up close, city meal was not just a visual detail. It shaped mood, behavior, and the amount of strain people had to absorb before the day was done. That is why details like practical Roman lunch mattered so much. They were part of the real pressure of the day, not decorative backgrounds somebody could safely ignore. As the hours moved on, comfort mattered less than endurance. The body moved through dirt, sandals, weather, and crowded public space all day. Baths existed and mattered, but they did not erase the physical roughness of city life or the fact that streets were noisy, mixed, and full of smells. Daily life in Rome involved constant exposure to other people's bodies, business, and movement, not personal comfort bubbles. This is the part of the routine that modern comfort tends to hide from view. Comfort, privacy, and convenience were often traded away for durability, speed, or plain necessity. That is why details like the physical feel of the city mattered so much. They were part of the real pressure of the day, not decorative backgrounds somebody could safely ignore. If you slow the scene down, the routine becomes easier to read. Most people were not performing for history. They were trying to keep ordinary life from slipping out of control. At the same time, people were navigating obligations that were social as much as practical. Roman society pressed hierarchy into ordinary interactions. Patron-client ties, status differences, household authority, slavery, and citizenship rules all influenced how a person moved through the day. Even a citizen was not moving through a free and equal public world. They were moving through a layered system where who you knew and where you stood mattered constantly. Who had authority, who waited, and who absorbed the inconvenience all mattered here. Daily life was never only about survival. It was also about staying inside the rules of the community. If you slow the scene down, the routine becomes easier to read. Most people were not performing for history. They were trying to keep ordinary life from slipping out of control. By evening, the full shape of the lifestyle came into view. By evening, the city shifted toward household meals, lamps, gossip, and whatever rest people could claim. A modest dinner with family or housemates likely mattered more to many Romans than the famous public events history books remember. That is what makes an ordinary Roman day interesting. The empire looked enormous from above, but it was lived one errand and one meal at a time. The end of the day still carried chores, small decisions, and low-level planning. Looking at the whole day at once makes the era feel less abstract and more human. Moments like this also carried quiet decision-making. People were constantly judging effort, risk, timing, and whether the household could absorb one more problem. Put it all together, and a normal day for the average Roman citizen feels less like a legend and more like a day somebody actually had to get through. A Roman day was built less by spectacle than by errands, obligations, public spaces, food, and the social rules of the city. This is why routine matters so much in historical storytelling. It reveals the world that grand political events were built on top of. That close-up view is what turns a famous era back into regular human life.